that, I'll just take any questions that anybody might have on any projects.
Questions? Thank you. There's Nate.
Good afternoon, Brian Kluchar. There are no changes to the project update. Be glad to take any questions. Thank you.
Thanks. Transportation Planning Division. Traffic Operations, John Grant. Okay. Nope. Okay. That brings us to the consent agenda. We have approval of the minutes. TIP accelerated amendment number 3. Fiscal year 25 UPWP admin modification 3. Year 27 UPWP amendment number 1. Request for additional funding for C 5181. Reserve fund balance policy. And continuity of operations plan. Any questions, comments, concerns on the consent agenda?
Question on the fund balance policy.
Sure.
So if it's used, does the board get a report, or how is that going to work?
Yes.
Just I'm looking at it now, so I should have done a little more of my homework. Could you, I guess, elaborate a little bit on what it says?
I'm gonna leave it there.
Okay.
Specific section are you asking about?
I guess section 5. So if it says, may only be used on unbudgeted one-time expenditures. Does it get added to the budget at some point, like after the fact, or what?
Yes, we would have to have board approval before we presented it to CPRC, who is our budgeting entity.
Okay. So you'll have the fund balance, and if you want to use it, you will go to the board first and for approval before it's spent.
Before we put a budget amendment on the PRC agenda, we have to have affirmation from the board.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification.
Questions, comments, consent agenda? Not looking for a motion.
So move Paul Black, a triangle.
Moved by Paul,
Second, Becca Eversole.
second by Becca, all in favor? So passes unanimously. With that, we're on to the TC chair and vice chair election. Colleen?
Right. Well, it's that time of year where we elect our chair and vice chair for the technical committee. I did not receive any nominations for an additional chair or vice chair. Our current chair and vice chair are Eric and Caroline. Both have served 1 year and are eligible for an additional year. So they're up for re-election. At this point, I'm happy to entertain a motion.
Do they want to be reelected?
That is my understanding.
Okay.
I'd like to make a motion to nominate Eric Vitale.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Congratulations for both of you.
Do we need to vote for the vice chair?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Everything. It would have included Carolyn and have you amended. She wanted to return as vice chair.
Sorry.
In the absence of any other interested parties, I'm happy to stay another year. Thank you.
I'll move Caroline as vice chair.
Okay. Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion passes. Congratulations to you as well.
Oh, it's just,
This year, last year I wasn't here when I was.
Another year you'll be up.
Pretty sure that was your colleague Bergen that did that to you last year.
She's not here.
Yeah.
That brings us to safety, transportation performance measure targets for calendar year 2026 would be David and Brian.
My name is David Miller. I'm a transportation planner with Triangle West. We are joined by Brian Murphy from the NCDOT Traffic Safety Unit, and Matt Elby from the Traffic Safety Unit is also joining us online. And we are here to talk about the transportation performance measures, specifically safety target setting for 2026. And the requested action is for the TC to recommend that the board adopt a safety target for 2026. So before we begin, I want to mention that a few of the slides have been rearranged. So if you are following along with the file, that is included in the agenda packet and might look slightly different than what we're presenting on this screen. But we are going to be diving into the background on target setting and performance measures, explore some of the traffic safety data trends for our region, introduce the target options and approaches for 2026. We're going to highlight some of the safety resources, planning and coordination that all of us have been working on, and then open the floor for discussion and questions. So for those who are new to target setting at Triangle West, safety is a target that we must adopt targets for on an annual basis. It's a federal requirement. The NPO board last adopted safety targets in January of 2025. We must adopt targets for number of fatalities and rates, number of serious injuries and rates, and then the number of non-motorized fatalities and serious injuries. So safety target setting is going to look a little bit different at Triangle West for 2026, and I'll provide a little bit of background and context. So each year, the NPO board and the TC have been presented with one option for safety targets, and those are the targets that have been developed by the state. Thus, the NPO board has always adopted the state's targets, but this is not unique to Triangle West. Other NPOs have only been presented with the options that the state develops. But during the last few adoption cycles, the discussion at TC and board meetings guided NPO staff to explore developing our own safety targets, which we did as part of our regional Vision Zero action plan, which many, if not all of you, were a part of. And in that adopted plan, we identified a long-term goal of reducing fatalities and serious injuries by half by 2035, moving towards zero by 2050. But we have the opportunity through this annual adoption cycle to adopt short-term targets. So what that means is today we're looking at targets for 2026. But in our plan, it also guides us to look out 5 years. So 2026 to 2030. So since we are considering additional options besides the state's targets this year, a few things to think about. Should these targets be aggressive and aspirational, or should they be more conservative and achievable in the short term? So I'm going to pass it to Brian to get us into the safety data trends.
David, there's a lot of information in your packet. I'm definitely not going to go over all that today. So I'm going to focus more on kind of the data trends within the Triangle West NPO boundary and talk about kind of how those compare to statewide trends. Before we do that, I do want to mention our strategic highway safety plan at the state level, because that does kind of dictate how we set targets at the state level. So our strategic highway safety plan it's a statewide document. It's not just a DOT effort. But it takes into account the voices of a lot of stakeholders. to essentially kind of set the stage for how the state will tackle traffic safety issues. So there's MPO representation, RPO representation, municipalities, all range of government, and then private entities as well. But as part of that plan development, there is a goal that's adopted each time that plan is adopted. So the current goal that we're operating under is to reduce all fatalities and serious injuries by half by 2035, moving towards 0 by 2050, which is obviously very aggressive. So with that kind of in mind, I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the data trends within your MPO boundary. I'll spend just a couple extra seconds on this slide. So in these next few slides, all the state trends will be in orange, all the TPO trends in blue. And again, I'll just point out a few things related to magnitude, and also kind of how your trends may compare to the state. So the first one we're looking at is vehicle miles traveled. And again, that just gives a measure of activity on our system. It's not a perfect measure in that it's only measuring motor vehicle activity. But trends here is, you can see certainly increasing trends over time. We hit the pandemic years and things went a little wacky and you had stay-at-home orders and such. So you certainly saw that reflected in the travel that was measured on the systems. But now things are slowly going back up, and our travel on our system is higher than what it was kind of pre-pandemic levels at this point. And so your TPO boundaries, travel in your boundaries, is tracking very similar to how the state is there. Reported crashes is another metric that we look at. You'll see this tracks very closely as far as from a trend perspective with vehicle miles traveled. So the more activity on your system, the more opportunity for crashes. A couple of things from just a magnitude perspective. So about 300,000 reported crashes at the statewide level each year. That is a huge number, obviously. And then 15,000 or so within your TPO boundary. That's kind of a hard number to grasp, but when you start thinking about public resources that are involved in responding to each one of these events, clearing the queues, law enforcement has been at the scene of all of these. Likely you've got fire and EMS as well. And so it is a tremendous toll on society just from that perspective. And then obviously, we're getting ready to kind of get into some of the trends related to impacts to human life as well. And probably the key metric that we look at from a traffic safety perspective are fatalities on our system. And you can see that these are trending the wrong direction as well. And certainly saw a peak during the pandemic years. So kind of an opposite trend to how we saw for all crashes. This data goes through 2024. I will say 2025, we're probably going to be around 1,500 fatalities, which is about 200 different than where we were last year. 2024, we're about 1,700. So these numbers are starting to trend down a little bit. That 2025 numbers are nowhere near as complete yet. So it's say that cautiously and optimistically from that perspective. But and then you'll see kind of what the trends look like within your TPO boundary. So 30 to 60 fatalities within the boundaries of your TPO each year. Injuries is another key metric that we look at. So these are those disabling type injuries. And again, trending fairly closely here. You got in your TPO, we're actually reducing a good bit more kind of compared to the statewide trends, but about 5,000 of these at the statewide level, and then 125 to 175 at your TPO boundary. Non-motorized fatalities and serious injuries. Again, this is a rising trend, really, no matter kind of how you break down the data. Certainly it's a national trend. We're seeing that at the state level, and you all are seeing that certainly within your TPO boundaries as well as our most urbanized areas. And then I'll close this section just on a few of the more kind of behavioral specific ones. And so looking at alcohol involved fatalities and serious injuries. So alcohol is involved in about 20% of all of our fatal and serious injury crashes. Those trends have been increasing as well. And certainly over time, looking at it from your TPO perspective, you see a similar trend. Speed involved, again, about 15% of all of our fatal and serious injury crashes involve speed, and similar trends there with your TPO as well. Unbelted is one that's, it's a difficult one. So that one is about 20% or more in some areas of the state of all of our fatal and serious injury crashes. So a good number within your TPO boundary as well. So thinking about how do you solve this problem, it's a complicated solution, right? It's not just infrastructure, it's not just behavior. It's kind of all these systems kind of working together to bring these numbers down. And then the last slide here in this section is just simply kind of a breakdown of where crashes are occurring at within your TPO boundary by municipal limits, and then the rural perspective is there as well. So there's some other ways to look at that, some other resources we'll get into toward the end, but back to David.
So just picking up on the regional safety trends. So this shows the number of fatalities and serious injuries on the roads in our MPO area between 2015 and 2024. You can see that the number of serious injuries have been declining steadily since 2022, but fatalities have been slowly creeping up since 2021. And then these two graphs show the number of fatal crashes and the number of serious crashes in our MPO area between 2020 and 2024. They are broken out by road ownership. And so in the two shades of blue, we have the NC DOT roads, and then the two shades of orange, we have locally owned roads. So you can see that the majority of fatal crashes and serious injury crashes are occurring on NC DOT roads. You can kind of also see them broken out by urban and rural context. But there are a fair number occurring for both on the local urban roads, likely due to that's where there are more vehicle and vulnerable road user interactions. So Brian's gonna get us started with the performance measures and targets.
Yep, and I'll go through this really quickly. David kind of gave an overview of this, but there is federal legislation that requires each state and each MPO to report on the 5 metrics that you see on the screen. These are the number and rate of fatalities, number and rate of serious injuries, and then the number of non-motorized fatalities and serious injuries. So as most of you know, I see a lot of familiar faces. This is an exercise that we go through annually. Federal Highway does prescribe how they want to see the targets, but there is some flexibility on kind of how we set them. So reporting dates, state has to report in August. MPOs have to report by February 27th. So how are the targets set? So it really is up to each state and MPO as far as kind of what methodology they use to set targets. And as David mentioned earlier, the MPOs can adopt the state's targets, or they can come up with their own. So how does the state set their target? It's really related back to that goal that's set in the Strategic Highway Safety Plan of reducing fatalities and serious injuries by half, moving towards 0 by 2050. And so obviously we know where we were in the past. We know where we will be. We can do some math to tell us if we're making steady progress, where we need to be at each of those years, kind of working towards that goal. And that's exactly how we set the goals or the targets at the state level. The state is assessed as to whether they meet those targets or make significant progress. We were last assessed early 2025, and we did not determine we did not meet or make significant progress. Again, we set very aggressive goals at the state level. So the one thing I should mention here is that the MPOs are not assessed directly, but obviously if the state's going to meet their goals, then we all have to kind of be working in the same direction. So if the MPO or TPO was assessed, you also would not have met your targets or made significant progress. I'm not going to go into all this, but there's a ton of information in your packet. There's a ton of information online if you want to dig into safety data for your specific town or TPO region. Safety is a very data-rich environment, so there's a lot of information that's.
So going into the approaches that we're presenting for 2026, just a few questions to think about that we thought about at the MPO. But which scenario best fits the vision of safety for the Triangle West region? Are these targets achievable, or should they be more aspirational? So we are presenting 4 different options. They are listed here from most aggressive to least aggressive. So starting with the most aggressive, option A, we're calling this just a dramatic reduction of 100%. So setting the targets for 0 across the board for 26. If we want to look ahead through 2050, just maintaining that 0. Option B is what we're just calling a sharp reduction for 2026. And these are the targets that Brian shared that the state have developed. And you can see that we're thinking ahead. So reducing by 50% by 2035, moving towards zero by 2050, which is a shared goal in our Vision Zero plan and the state. Option C is what we're calling just a steady reduction of 3% for 2026. And if we want to look 5 years out, we're seeing that steady reduction of 3% annually, moving towards a reduction by half by 2035, and then zero by 2050. And then the least aggressive option, option D, steady reduction of 1% for 2026, and then annually over the next 5 years. And again, reducing by half by 2035, zero by 2050. So these are the actual numbers assigned to these targets. I believe this table is in your agenda packet, but this is what it looks like on a graph. So starting with option D and C, which are the least aggressive options that the TPO have come up with, really the thought behind this is that we'll just see a steady reduction over the short term for 2026 through 2030 versus short-term interventions. But as we move through medium-term interventions, such as projects in the STIP or long-term interventions through projects in the MTP, continuing to see a shift in road safety culture change, we'll see that sharper reduction over time and moving towards our target of zero by 2050. And the green line here, those are the NCDOT targets that Brian shared. And then in the turquoise color, that's the dramatic reduction of 100%. So really just having the target set at zero and just maintaining that zero if we want to think ahead all the way through 2050. So a wide array of options for 2026. All right, so we're going to close our presentation by just highlighting some resources and planning before we open it up for discussion.
In your packet, I'm not going to speak to that because that's a horrible slide, but there's a lot of information that's mapped and available online. Again, safety is a data rich, but all of our safety projects that we spend safety specific funds, so that would be state spot safety or highway safety improvement program funding. Those are all mapped and available for view. You can see kind of which ones are completed, which ones are in progress, and that sort of thing. We also have a lot of information on non-motorist crashes. That's been in response to a lot of the feedback that we've heard at some of these types of meetings. So with these dashboards, you can select your boundary, your MPO, your city, your county, and then all the numbers around the outside kind of reflect specifically the boundary that you've chosen. So you can also click on the individual crashes and see more information about those individual events as well. And then we just stood up kind of a statewide crash data dashboard. This is updated monthly. So one of the things that we've heard is more real-time information. And so it does take some time for this information to kind of get from law enforcement into those statewide databases. But this is something that we're updating monthly. Same thing, you can select your specific area that you're interested in, and all the charts and graphs and numbers reflect specifically your boundary.
I'll just close it out before we open it up for discussion. Just wanted to highlight some of the safety planning and coordination that we've been doing in Triangle West, as well as many of you. So as mentioned, Triangle West adopted a regional Vision Zero action plan in April of 2025. And we just held our second annual regional safety summit in Chapel Hill in November. But there are also a lot of great local Vision Zero initiatives, projects, and plans that have been worked on. The city of Durham has their own local Vision Zero plan. Many of you have safe routes to school plans. Safety is embedded in your local transportation plans. And I'd also like to share that town of Carrboro, Orange County, and Durham County were recently awarded SS4A planning and demonstration grants. So a lot of great safety work happening in our area. There's also a conversation happening now with speed cameras in school zones. I know many of you are part of those conversations. Triangle West is definitely listening in, and we're looking forward to seeing how we can support you if you choose to enact such a program in your area. As Brian mentioned, NCDOT has a lot of safety projects in the works, and of course we can continue to work with them on the planning and design and delivery of those projects to ensure safety is a key component. And we're also building upon our relationships with our law enforcement agencies, public health professionals, and schools, various community organizations. which really underscores that improving roadway safety really is a multidisciplinary effort. And then finally, just aligning these safety targets with funding and investments. And so what that means at Triangle West is that during our call for projects and our spot submittals, the projects that are being put forth for consideration have safety as a key component of those. And that scoring of those projects, safety is a key factor in those, which ones to advance. And then finally, I just want to highlight the strategies and actions that are in our safety action plan. And so in the plan, we've identified 12 overarching strategies with 87 different actions to improve roadway safety. And you can kind of consider them being assigned to Triangle West, the states, our member jurisdictions, and various community partners. If you attended our regional safety summits back in November, you attended a breakout session where we explored 5 of these in various actions. And I will be following up after this meeting to ask all of you to share some key updates pertaining to any of these actions and strategies, so we can include that in an annual safety report, which we'll be publishing for the first time sometime in the summer. And that report is actually one of the actions that came out of our plan that's been assigned to Triangle West. So be on the lookout for that email. All right, so I know it's a lot of information, looking forward to the discussion. But the action today, again, is for the TC to recommend that the board adopt safety targets for 2026. So with that, any questions?
Thanks, David. I'll start things off. I actually have a question. I'm wondering what good is lowering the goal going to do besides making it appear that we're making more progress towards the goal? To be fair, 0 deaths on the roadway is the only acceptable number. So if we're not meeting that goal, shouldn't we be pursuing the strategies and actions more aggressively instead of lowering the goal?
Good question. So one thing I didn't mention, the 3 TPO developed targets that I shared have actually already been adopted by other MPOs. Other MPOs are starting to develop their own targets for consideration. So it really all depends on what the TC and the board think is the most acceptable. Sure, if we set them least aggressively, we have probably a better opportunity to say that we are actually meeting that goal, but it's really up to what you want to recommend the board to adopt and what they ultimately adopt.
Thanks. Yeah,
Something I wanted to highlight. As we're considering these goals, I'd like to take a moment to congratulate Durham County and the town of Carver for the recent Safe Streets for All wins. Great job, guys. These are the kinds of projects that we are endorsing and our partners and members are putting in that are going to have real effects and to reach our goals. Either of them would like to talk about their projects.
Sure. Thanks, Doug, for highlighting that. And, just for everyone, Durham County's project is primarily an EMS project. It's that post-crash care element that we talked about kind of late in the development of the plan and added late. So paid off, to get that in there and be able to apply. And it is coordinated with Orange County. And for those of you not familiar with EMS services, they're provided by the counties to everyone in the county. So it benefits the population of all the municipalities too. So I'm excited about that. It really benefits almost everyone in our MPO except for China County. Thanks for being able to, for this committee, adding that to the plan and allowing us to apply. Take it off.
Our award, which we're very happy to hear from Christmas time that we got that. Great Christmas present for Scarborough. Is mostly focused around our work towards Safe Routes to School, and it's a demonstration grant, and it will be used to install some new striping closer to all of our elementary schools, especially Carver Elementary School and McDougal Elementary School. We will be installing some new RFBs, rectangular rapid flashing beacons, and adding buffers to bike lanes on Hillsborough Road near Harper Elementary School, and doing some restriping improvements at a couple of intersections near Harper Elementary School.
Just to add to Becca's good work on this project, it's particularly exciting for a small town working to kind of build the network, because this will connect with our regional flexible project that involves the improvements on Shelton Street. So it's a way of combining two projects. So that's one big. So
Thanks for sharing. All right, so with that being said, on this agenda item, where we need to make a recommendation, I mean, the city is in favor of sticking with a more aggressive approach at option A or B. So I'm interested to hear, does anyone else have any opinions on that? Yes.
I guess I was wondering the same question that you expressed earlier. You know, what is I think we are all seeking the best option, acknowledging, aim high kind of thing. And so unless there's some reward for achieving your goals, I'm not really sure what the benefit would be in choosing low. So certainly not D, maybe one of the middle ones if we're not comfortable going with A, but I think we're all seeking to have our network as safe as it can be.
Yeah, I mean, having the most least aggressive obviously is, you have an opportunity to share that you're meeting it, but I will say that French Broad River MPO, from what I understand, they were the first MPO to adopt their own safety targets, which they did last year, which align more with option C and D, and they actually met the targets that they adopted, and they were excited to share that. So it's really, but yeah, I mean, I agree, we all want A, right? So that would be the benefit.
Oh, yeah, piggybacking on Tina's question, I know there's a quote unquote financial penalty for not meeting the targets, right? Which is you have to spend more money on safety, which we already do, is my understanding. So there's no financial benefit saying, other than saying we met them, right. Woohoo, there's no financial benefit to meeting them.
Right, and yeah, we're not docked anything at the NPO if we don't meet them. Obviously, we haven't met them.
Yeah, if I could just add too, David mentioned in the Vision Zero action plan, our targets are consistent with the DOT targets anyway. So, there's a case to be made for sticking with the DOT targets, or being more aggressive.
And I remember it was the perception, at least a few years ago, that there would be quite a bit of work in creating our own targets. Have you already done that work, or is there a lot more work to do beyond this if we were to have our own targets?
So once we started diving into it during our Vision Zero plan, and we talked a little bit more with Brian and the folks at the traffic safety unit and what it entails. I mean, we've pretty much done what we need to do to develop our own targets, which we're presenting here. We kind of explained at a high level the methodology behind them if we want to choose, for example, C and D. So.
Okay.
We did the work. It is a lot of work, though.
Yeah.
Yeah. David has spent a lot of time on this over the last couple months.
Most of our serious injuries and fatalities are on DOT roads. Then it makes sense to me to align with what DOT is saying their goals are. They control their own roadways, so that's where I am personally leaning at the moment, option B.
I'll just throw it up there, because I do get to sit in on both board meetings, but Campo had this similar discussion probably about 6 months ago or so. And where they landed is probably closer to the C and D. And it was mainly from the perspective of their board saying they didn't like the idea of every year coming in and saying, well, we didn't make our target. Like, they wanted to have something that they felt was more achievable. And so that's sort of the direction they went in, but that was a board level decision.
I believe Campo adopted a reduction of 1% annually.
And I believe theirs is sort of incremental, like the reduction gets bigger over time. So it starts out smaller and then gets bigger over time.
Isn't that, feeling that nothing's happening, isn't that enough to like get people to do more stuff though?
Psychology, yeah.
Like the one, to change more, I mean.
It's worked great so far, right?
We're gonna have
And kind of along those same lines, I guess a little bit more, if we set the really dramatic, sharp targets, I think, David, you brought up all of those different objectives and tasks from the safety action plan, but is that like by adopting these more aggressive targets, is that going to be some, like, we need to back it up with action, or else we are just going to fail every time and feel bad about it. A lot of the actions are, like you said, they're Triangle West, they're DOT, they're entities that are not necessarily the municipalities. What sort of checks and balances are in place or going to be in place to ensure that this stuff is going to?
Yeah, there are actually quite a few that are quote unquote assigned to municipalities actually. And so part of that process is kind of mentioned that email, just like asking you all to share some of the key updates with any of these. I know all of you are, there are local Vision Zero task forces, y'all are working on projects. And so we definitely want to hear about those and showcase those in our annual report, which will help provide some of that accountability, but also highlight the great work that we're all working on. So there are a fair number for pretty much everybody in this room to work on if you so choose. But I know there are a lot of local plans and task forces and things that are guiding other work too.
Well, and when we dug into the data a little bit more, there are fatalities happening on local roads.
Yeah.
And you all have control over those roadways and can make changes too. So it's not as many as the DOT roads, but it's happening, unfortunately.
We're also all in this together. It would be great to see engaging D7, D5, and D8 from your community perspectives to try to find some ways to partner. You can't just look at it and say, well, it's DOT's road or it's the town's road and walk away from it. I mean, this is a regional problem and it's going to take a lot of partnership to solve.
Weren't there other benefits to adopting DOT's goals? Like from before, like plan continuity or something like that?
I don't know if there's a specific benefit to it. I think, yeah, just kind of listening to the conversation. I think, if you pick an easily achievable target, yeah, you can probably check the box and say that, yeah, we made it. But to me, that's kind of an empty feeling. To me, I like the aggressive targets because it kind of keeps the perspective on this. Like before safety targets, we weren't having these conversations in this room, and there's a lot of activity that's now taking place because of it. So, yeah, I don't know that there's a specific benefit other than just aligning with the state and that partnership. And I will say that Triangle West TPO has been awesome to work with, and they've really been pushing forward a lot of ideas in this space too.
Brian, based on your work on this system in many years, do you see essentially the department realigning its setting as NPOs or RPOs across the state may reconsider?
Yeah, I mean, I think it comes up each year. We have very similar conversations like this at the state level whenever we have these conversations. Some of it's the perspective is, let's set an achievable target, maybe aggressive, but achievable. And it's because, exactly what, Campo board kind of recognized was that it feels like a failure. Every year we come back, we hear the same thing. We're not meeting our targets. But there's also, the reality of that vision that when you start really thinking about it, what's an acceptable number of deaths on our system, and it's hard to get away from zero. And so something that's leading us towards zero, and that's kind of where, at the state perspective, that's where it's always kind of come back to is that, this is the vision, this is the goal. Yeah, we got a ton of work to do, but, let's keep the attention on this matter.
mean, I don't know if we have a unanimous decision, I'd like to make a motion to go with option B, if that's what everyone else desires. But can I make the motion, Mr. Chair?
Sure, or you may have someone else willing to make a motion.
I'll second that.
Yeah, sure.
Motion made.
All in favor of option B?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes unanimously. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
And thank you for putting, I know it's a lot of work to do that, so thank you.
Brings us to the memorandum of understanding update, and that would be done.
Great, how's everyone today?
Great.
So. HWA and FTA recommended updating our memorandum. What does the MOU do? Basically follows the headings that are in the draft proposal, finds what we do, which of our members are responsible for what, how we interact with NCDOT, a lot of the regulatory, federal regulatory, and some state regulatory clauses about compliance, and how we coordinate. Next one, please. So why are we doing this now? Well, our triennial certification is coming up, so we should probably complete the recommendation from the last one. Also, we are formerly known as DCHC. We don't want to be known as that in our documents, so it's time to go through and do some housekeeping. So we've gotten some input from others along the way, and some of the things we're trying to do is add public transportation voices at both the board level and at a separate transit operators and sponsors committee that we would stand up. You noticed in the draft, there are some changes to proposed membership of the TC, and including eliminating some members that don't show up, like certain state departments. Please don't take offense that I've tried to move anybody out. If you have capacity to regularly send the current number of people you have, just let me know. We perceived and mentioned that some agencies might have multiple seats on the TC, so having alternates and filling both those seats can be a little difficult. We've updated a lot of the federal laws. I want to talk about our focus areas. We anticipate things will change with federal reauthorization. One thing that came up, thank you, Ellen, for bringing out, I had not listed here, and I should call it out, proposed realigning the weighted voting structure to match population. Something I feel, or at least trying to align to population, is valuable, rather than right now it's just sort of some random shares presented yearly. I have no opinion on that, but it would, I think we should probably relook at that together. What makes sense now? So here's one more slide. I want to remind everyone of our strategic focus areas. A lot of this stuff comes up in our other enabling documents and agreements, but this is what the board should be adopting when they're ready to. Was that the last one? Oh, what's next? After we take all of your input and synthesize a draft document that addresses it, and we'll check back if we need to make sure that the input we get is appropriate. We want to complete those changes after both this body and the board have reviewed them. We will coordinate with the department. We've tried to cut Julie out of having to attend all the meetings, and they called and said, no, I can't do that. I didn't really, I just proposed a reduction in numbers, to make things more manageable. So we'll fix things like that. Make sure that everything's copacetic. We'll double check FHWA to make sure that it's copacetic with them. And then I get to go to every legislative body of every community and present the MOU and the changes. Officially, the regs say that it takes effect after 75% of the member population sign it. That's not what we want. We want 100%. We want everybody to be on board with it. And it's putting it forward. We'll work very hard to make sure that everybody is comfortable with it. One more? I know there's one more. Sorry, I put that together quick. I know your agenda says recommend approval. Let's not do that. Let's all take time and submit comments. If anybody has questions now, I'd be glad to try to answer them. If we get written comments, we'll present a draft to the board that includes those written comments and how we propose addressing them. If it needs explanation, it's just, well, you know, we want an extra representative, no problem. That's just adding a number to a sheet. If it's more detailed, then we'll talk about it. So if anybody have any questions they'd like to address now? Good, Paul.
You saw it coming. Go Triangle is going to get reduced in terms of their participation from a voting member to a non-voting member based on this. We did not ask for this. We're not interested in it. And as far as we're concerned, it's dead on arrival.
It is put in here because Go Triangle is not individually financially contributing to the MPO operations anymore. Take that input, Paul, but there is that caveat.
Yeah, we have been paying. I'm not sure. Yeah, because we have been paying dues. I don't think we pay dues at Campo, but we have been paying dues here. As far as I know, I'm not aware of any changes to that. You may know something I don't know.
You reimbursed through the county.
I don't know.
It's in our work
You do.
program.
Yeah.
So
But I mean, the Durham County transit plan, I know funds 30.
Orange County, I believe, funds the other half.
I did meet with Dr. Smith.
Okay.
Yeah, this MOU, if I'm reading it correctly, would actually increase the transit plan's responsibility because currently that 7% Go Triangle pays is split between Orange County and Durham County's transit plan. This MOU says the transit plan to pay 12%.
There's something else that Go Triangle asks the transit plans to reimburse, and that's the financial participation in the Triangle Regional Model, which Paul has the board adopted, withdrawing from that yet, or at least.
Yeah, that is a separate issue. And again, we are looking to, because basically Go Triangle had been paying the freight for all the transit providers in the region. And we wanted to step back from that. We figured now that we're not doing one big project like Regional Rail or Durham Orange Light Rail, that we didn't need to shoulder that burden by ourselves anymore, that every transit agency is taking advantage of the transit improvements that have been made to the regional model. So spreading that out across 5307 and both MPOs seemed to make more sense based on where we are today than where it was when we first started doing this.
But the explanation of why.
There'd be no net impact to the transit plan, it'd just be moving where the money is.
Relatively close.
Okay.
Well, the good thing about the TRM modeling process is we adopt kind of a multi-year work plan budget ahead of time. We want to make sure that we're doing that because we don't always know what it's going to look like. But roughly another 5% that, of course, we can right size it depending on the.
I mean, it'd be helpful in presenting this to the board or this group again to just make that clear, because it is confusing where money's going from different sources, and I'd like to see specific numbers. And would this be for FY27, like ideally?
Potentially.
So I mean, that also affects, I guess, the timing of our work program approval.
Yeah, I have to verify that.
You know, activity over 60 months.
Yes, I'd have to verify that there's a 27 work plan sheet for that, or
But again, in a region that puts a lot of emphasis on regionalism and transit, this seems like a step backward. So if that comes out, then everything else looks great. I like the idea of creating that transit committee. Transit does have different things that the highway people don't necessarily need to have to listen to. I'm sure you'd appreciate getting that time in your life back for something else. I think likewise, transit folks sometimes, I think we're still interested in the highway stuff because we're running our services on the highways, but it doesn't always necessarily go back the other way. And we don't need to waste your time with transit stuff if you're not interested.
I guess on that committee, does the committee make recommendations to the TC? It goes directly to the board. Okay.
goes as a equal representation. And Go Triangle still keeps a voice on the board. The times that that voice is going.
With the new transit committee, I would maybe suggest having a go-to representative more from the fixed route side and maybe also one from the access side. If the city is open to that, I think that might be helpful instead.
It's written so that the city, so any member can select it.
Yeah, I'm saying those are kind of two different things. On the TC though, it seems like there's some changement to the membership because of difficulties finding enough members to retain from certain members. I can't speak to the other members, but at least for Durham County, we have had all three members at every TC meeting as long as I have worked here. I have no.
We've already gotten feedback about that.
Okay.
And it will go back to the members.
Okay.
Please don't sleep on sending me your written comments, and I appreciate everyone's future work on it.
Do you have a deadline that you'd like those by?
Yeah. Okay, that's actually a really great idea.
I want you to be like, okay, I'm done with this, and then like a flood of comments come in a week later. That's the worst.
Okay.
We have planning commission at 5:30, and I just got comments on something like, and like, yeah, that's possible. I can really do something.
Right on time.
Make it March 28th.
What's that?
March 28th.
Oh, plenty. Okay.
No, the goal is to have the MG award left this for World War.
Wait, you said March.
March.
Okay.
That's fair. I'm kind of surrounded by people that have lost smarter than me. Okay.
Just to be clear, January 24th.
28th.
It's January 28th.
26.
So is the
Yes, 28th.
That'll give me 3 business days to make sure they're all following through.
so this is going to the board in this month or
February.
next month? Next month is
Well,
going to the
I'm
board?
going to bring it to them and ask for comments also.
This month?
27.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Is there any more details you can provide on the TOSC? Are they expected to meet like monthly? Is it gonna be like a monthly thing or less frequently or?
I mean, I think that they'll identify their meeting cycle and bylaws.
Okay, that's all to be decided. Okay,
I mean, I think it would make sense to meet on the same months that everyone else meets. That's nine months a year, but it's really up to the members that.
thanks. Sure. Yeah, can you remove?
I think he removed the action.
Can I sit down?
Yeah, thank you, Doug. All right, with no action, that brings us to tip amendment 2 from.
Hello, everyone. I'm Tom Slauson, planner of NPO, TPO, sorry. And you can follow on latest in the minute. So just a quick intro. The TIP is a 10-year document that has project development modes, has funding and schedules, and it requires amendments whenever any of those details are changed. So in this amendment, a new project we have, Michael Triangle is adding, so improving some bus stops in Hillsborough. And then additionally, there's a couple other just project updates. Bus plan implementation of hard roads, moving that to the current year, just so we can progress with that. And also adding some videos to the operating systems and additions to those, just adding and handouts for November, December, and January. And you might want to just be released this public comment to come back in March for approval. A couple of items on this agenda, but amendment, does anyone have any questions on them?
The item N changes, there was a lot of schedule changes to City of Durham projects. Were those just done by DOT? I don't remember talking about some of them.
As we talked with Barney and Stipping it, they made changes on their end from our discussion and updated.
Okay.
Yeah.
Want to have any comments or questions?
No, I think it would be helpful if the STIP unit is going to propose changes to the item N on projects that they at least maybe have more than just a discussion, but there's an acknowledgement that.
Okay, thanks. Looking for recommendation, well, for release for public comment.
Move, Paul Black, go Triangle.
Move
All
along.
second.
Second by Aaron, all in favor? Any opposed? That's unanimously. Thanks. With that, we're up to federal funding policy update. Probably.
That's me. I'm gonna give that update from my seat, if that's okay with you guys. You want me to go up? I mean, it might be good to stand. All right, I'll go up. Come on. New clicker.
That's on the.
Thank you. So I'm going to talk a little bit about federal funding policy. I know many of you are already very familiar with this, so I'll go quickly. I'm going to talk about the changes that we're proposing today and then the recommended action. Our regional flexible funding pot is made up of a variety of funding sources. This is the funding that the NPO allocates to projects. So we have the block grant, direct attributable, block grant any area funding, transportation alternatives program, congestion mitigation air quality, and the probably soon to go away carbon reduction program funding. This is the pot of funding available for us to allocate towards projects. We have our current call for projects open right now through the end of this month. Once all those projects are submitted, we are, as NPO staff, are the ones who determine which projects receive which type of federal funding source, usually based on the project, what funding we have available. Types of projects that are eligible are all public transit, bike ped facilities, TSM, transportation system management projects, scenic and environmental enhancement, planning studies. So that looks like something old. We have DCHC in there. I'll clean that up later. And safety projects are eligible as of our most recent update. Projects must have a documented safety. And most phases of funding are eligible. So NEPA, right-of-way acquisition, construction, transit capital, TDM projects, utilities, and construction. So I'm going to briefly, there are three kind of big changes that we're proposing in this federal funding policy update. So the biggest one is a separate policy for the quote fund swap funding. And this is funding that becomes available during August redistribution as a result of NCDOT reallocating funding for projects that haven't moved forward on their adopted schedule and making sure they can get as much funding obligated in the state as possible. They swap that funding off of our projects. They put other funding, or they make other funding available for those projects. Kind of goes into a big bucket, is the way I look at it. And they take that funding that we had obligated to our projects and make sure it gets obligated within that year. That funding, we want to make sure it gets obligated, or it gets allocated as soon as possible so that there's no risk to those funds going away for our MPO area. It's a very large bucket of funding right now, over $20 million. And so we have quite a bit of funding to allocate quickly. And that's one of the things we're proposing in the federal funding policy update is separate that out from the big RFF pool and get that funding assigned to a project that's going to be delivered very soon. Second big change is any projects that are funded through our call for projects will require a grant agreement with Triangle West. And that grant agreement will include the project schedule and the 2 years that that project has 2 years to be delivered. And if not, we'll have some discussions about that. But the potential is that that money goes back into the RFF pool. And that project would need to recompete for funding.
Sorry, you said project needs to be delivered within 2 years or just
That's the schedule for the project.
I would say, and this may be my fault for some of the input I put in the draft, but the phases that are funded should be started. So that will mean that the funding's obligated.
The funding will be obligated at that point. Important clarification. Thank you.
So when you say started, do you mean in the NCDOT system, EBS says you're in construction, or do you mean there's dirt being moved on the site?
That means that the FHWA, FTA, whoever's funded it, has acknowledged to NCDOT that the fund's been moved from federal accounts to state accounts. It's obligation. So it's different for different projects. Like obviously if it's design, there's not going to be dirt.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
So for transit, I think it's still a little bit different, right? Oh, you do 5307 and stuff. It's when moved into which account?
Trams. Once it's available on trams.
Yeah. So it just depends.
Got it.
It may be helpful if we.
Yes, we will. And we will be requiring a certification that that non-federal match is in place when the project is being applied for. Eric.
Yeah, there was some confusion and I cleared it up, Doug, earlier today, but I guess it's more or less that, can I ask if that's rewritten in a way that makes more sense? Because the way I understood it now is that the organization has the financial capacity to deliver the funds, not that the funds are in place for that specific project. Right?
Right. So as an alternative, Eric and I did talk, he called me out of concern for a couple things. So I don't want anyone to think we're having behind the scenes conversations and making deals. Eric pointed out that the PFO might struggle to sign off having that particular money, but if there is an adopted CIP, legislatively adopted by the organization, that would suffice instead of having the PFO. I think right now it's like
a CIP page or something like that when you're applying for it.
What can be planned but not appropriated in the specific budget year. So
it can be either.
okay, well then planned won't be what you get most likely, right?
Yeah.
I guess I'm thinking about this. I understand your reason for doing this, although I do suspect that. I'm about, I'm being conceited.
Okay.
Yeah. I guess what I'm wondering is the practical way that this is actually put in place. Because I'm thinking we have to commit to the DOT requirements for budget projects, a signed letter per project, indicating a commitment to the local government to participate in the project. In other words, commit to the local match. So now we are doing an additional agreement with the TPO. If you have transit money, you have to do a third agreement. And with the exception of DOT, which in theory is the most cumbersome administratively, it's now becoming the least cumbersome administratively, because as projects increase in funding, which is inevitable, is the expectation that we will now do multiple agreements per year with the MPO. I mean, for those of us that need like a month lead time to get something on the agenda, and then council members drop meetings, you know, this could create a huge amount of stress in addition to just moving a project forward. So I understand the concept. I'm just wondering how this is actually gonna work in real life situations.
Considering we're assigning projects years out right now, or at some point, you know, there should be plenty of time to work out the agreement. We're also proposing that, you know, you guys are more or less telling us the schedule of when it's more acknowledgement. Basically, it's like, and then knowledge that if things don't that funding awarded could be, you know.
But aren't we kind of already in that situation? I mean, if you don't complete a project within a certain window of time, DOT can take that money back from you. I guess what I'm worried about is the smaller organizations who now potentially are going to lose their voting power to a certain extent as we go from the Senate to the House of Representatives with our membership. That it is, for some of us, you really have to work way in advance, and finance directors need a certain comfort level of entry into any kind of agreement. And so every opportunity to remove that funding makes finance directors less willing to enter into agreements to begin with. And I just speak from Carrboro, where we have projects that have been delayed because of this issue, where they have been reticent to enter into agreement, the result of which a project has just for a couple of years until we could pick it up again because of this concern, that agreements. And so I'm just trying to find this balance of the interest that you have with the reality of smaller governments. Maybe this isn't an issue, maybe it's just for maybe Hillsborough and Scarborough. But I know for us, it has been an issue in the past.
Well, right now, the provision is if a project is not advanced within 2 years, the book is supposed to start, that the money can be clawed back. And we've not enforced that. And part of why I'm reluctant to ask the board to enforce it, because we do have projects that are not moving forward, and there's no single entity here that is perfect at delivering projects. It doesn't mean that there's necessarily an acknowledgement of the fact that comes to work. Like, okay, we got the grant money, we got this much money, we're gonna maybe start this project then, or we're not gonna worry about delay. And meanwhile, that is blocking the other members out from maybe delivering a project, or maybe us being able to show better spending performance on our funds than we do now. So it allows an acknowledgement that we would like to see a future where we're spending money in the year we're supposed to spend it. So there's no risk. There's zero risk of the department, who right now could take the money and spend it anywhere. It's a informal agreement. So we don't have $22 million sitting there. That's what the goal is. You know, there are some ways that we can address your concerns and still work towards that goal. I'd love to hear.
PDM is going to compete with all other projects. It will no longer be funded off the top.
Just asking a question from my experience. Is that something you've run by the board and they're okay with? Yet?
We're going to try to match, and I think the board will be okay. We're going to try to match spending performance. So the same thing, we're not over allocating money based off something coming off the top, but we're looking at average expenditures. And if there's a situation where, however, TDM has provided oversight, that they get more applications or they get more requests, that's what,
Yeah, I have no problem with that concept at all. I just remember from my previous time, that was kind of a,
Don't touch this.
don't touch this from the board members. And if that's changed, great.
we're just trying to, but again, it's not putting elbows out to block other people from.
Right. Yeah.
Accessing the funds.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's been a bit of a fund balance there for,
Okay.
for a variety of reasons, but
Great. Okay, sounds good.
all the money's not being spent right now. We wish it were.
Sorry.
You can go ahead, Shannon.
I was just gonna ask, since the TDM folks have their own kind of standalone grant package, is this, so is the idea that they would do their call for projects and based on the number of grants that they wanted to do, that would help to find the money here?
Great question.
I'm just not quite sure how that works.
Work with them to understand how the spending performance has happened over rolling average. At the starting, what they might apply for. And then work with them to make sure that the initial award is at least what they need, and if there's more that they need. Go from there. But I should let Matt talk. He's the PDM expert.
Yeah.
I will say what we are kind of working on right now is trying to look at what's been spent in the past and then build in some sort of a contingency on top of that for that in case something new comes in.
And we will be working on a joint TDM plan update with Campo and coming soon.
So we're not just trying to address the trend in this policy, but we're actively funding and working with the TDM program to revisit some things and revamp.
Question. The agenda, it notes that the federal funding policy was revised to include the policy for allocating the SWAP funds. Point me to that in the document because I don't see it. Okay, sorry. What?
It's on the first few pages. There's a Word doc with track changes.
The bottom paragraph of the first page.
Got some questions about that too.
Let's do it, Eric.
I was wondering, does
Got it.
that decrease the future RFF pod, or does that have an effect on the future RFF?
I mean, technically it decreases it because it won't have that additional $20 million in there, but as we spend our money, we get more money. So getting projects delivered on time benefits all of us because those projects won't be holding more money in the pot that has to be swapped in and out.
So if there's not enough shovel-ready projects, when the fund swaps happen, that money essentially could funnel back into the RFF?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it could. And we usually get a letter in September, I think after August redistribution, and it's an IOU letter. Stipulate.
Yeah. Isn't this state money? Like,
Not
can you explain, I guess, exactly how the swaps money materializes?
It's a good question. I don't know. I don't think I've seen it actually materialize. Yeah.
I mentioned,
It would become available during August redistribution, but I don't know if we've actually completed a project that's used swap funds since I've been here.
Nobody really has.
No, not any other MPOs in the state are really doing this either.
And at least one's up to a $35 million balance.
Okay, but and maybe NCDOT can help out, because this is my rudimentary understanding that I don't know if it's correct or not, right? The federal money, lapses after if it's not used, and nobody likes that because it means we're sending money back to Washington and we're not spending it in North Carolina. So if, this is my understanding, the state gets this balance, right? It's getting bigger and bigger and, federal money's not being spent. So then they find a state funded project and say, okay, let's put some of that money on this state funded project over here, to get it spent. And then they're swapping the state money in, with that federal money that they just took out. So that's been my understanding, that this becomes state money then. And if that is,
I think that's necessarily the case. And I think that it's more about the year it's in as well. I mean, in Florida, they could take money from one MPO and put it in a different MPO area too. So if there was a project that was ready to go in Hillsborough County, they'd take our money and give it to Hillsborough, and they didn't give it back to us. North Carolina's actually very nice.
yeah, they're giving it back.
Are promising to give it back to us, but we haven't taken them up on it yet.
Keep in mind, there are some things that are ineligible under STO. So there may be a point where we are getting funding back because of the actual project we want to apply it to that is federal funding, that the state would basically move at the STIP level. Then it all just being state money, and anything we don't use, we can't use on non-motor.
That answers your question.
I just want a confirmation, is this federal money or is it not federal money?
It
And
could
does it,
It could be any. Yeah. It depends on what's available at the time we need it.
Work with the STIP unit to determine the most appropriate.
so it could be, you're saying it could be federal or state money. Federal money requires a 20% match, state money would not. So that does matter.
State money is a local match
Yeah.
sometimes.
Yeah, so we may ask for 80% of it to be federal. And then only a non-motorized project, the community would still, or the project sponsor would still the 20%.
And of course, federal money, you have to follow the federal process. So
You still have to with. Once you get the,
NEPA,
once you get because we dealt with the project in Durham, the D5, taking on construction at Junction Road and she, if it's funded in their system, it is a STIP project, another project. Program it and it's funded through there. Has to follow that.
This 20 million, is that just for this current RFF, or is that how much we're gonna have each time we do it, or?
No, I think that's what it is for current RFF. The money we get back in swaps depends on projects that are not moving forward in the year that it didn't move forward in 26. So
It'll
the
vary.
schedule changed. It will vary from year to year. How much was it this year? Not 20 million total, but it was like an additional 2 million or something like that.
Last August redistribution, we got
3.28 million this year. Just adds to the. Eric.
Numbers 2 and 3, are those going to be in effect for this ongoing call for projects?
That's our thinking, yes. Now, because we're changing the rules while the call's open, I think we'll have some flexibility in working with you as far as the grant agreement and certification about the match being in place. There will be some flexibility.
That call is currently open.
Yes, through the end of this month for fiscal year 28.
Is there any chance that would stay open longer, given that it's changing?
The deadline is the end of.
When we have to amend the TA.
I mean, it just bumps everything back. So.
There's probably something we could. I didn't know if there was like a sticking with deadline for when we had to change.
No, there is not. But getting the project's funded and actually and have enough time to get started, because it takes a while. I mean, those of you who worked on these to get the municipal agreement in place, then. So, you're the guru of the schedule, so.
Working around our tip schedule and also around 2 months to February, May, and July. Main reason why we couldn't push back too far without the end commission.
So we can, yeah, we can.
We'll take a look at it.
Yeah, there is some, but you know, how much it is.
And it might be you submit your application, but it doesn't have this thing and we can wait. So.
Remember,
Knowing
it's always helpful to schedule a meeting with Phil on before submitting the applications, so we can help have all the information that needs to be included on them.
The city submitted some detailed comments to you on the fund swap section. Is that?
Would you like to discuss them in front of everyone?
No, they're kind of dry and boring.
Yes, we are.
I was just gonna ask when they're gonna be in, when we expect responses.
You submitted them to me yesterday in the
Yeah.
afternoon, and so I have not had time to incorporate them into the current draft.
So by the
I
time,
think we can, let's discuss them in front of everyone and get consensus that others agree.
I mean, if we're asked to take action on them, I am interested in what city changes. will be.
okay, I mean,
And maybe we're not
There-
ready to take
the
action.
city
There-
requested some additional details on how the funding swaps will work and how we will prioritize for that funding swap money. Now, we proposed some. We have, can we pull it up?
I have them handy. We asked, if there are multiple shovel-ready projects, how would the TPO decide which to select, like to move forward? Like, if there wasn't, say, $20 million, if there was like 5 million, 2 projects, or both shovel-ready.
Steve would agree on the recommendation.
That'd be presented to the board, okay?
I mean,
After your
yeah.
recommendation.
I would just add, I think it would follow the same scoring as the federal funding policy itself, as far as, you know, we would look at the projects that are submitted, we'd score them according to what's already in the rest of the scoring would be the same. And maybe we add something about, I mean, maybe there's like a need. I don't know exactly what that looks like right now.
Yes, we are, once the project prioritization grant work begins, and definitely by the time it concludes, we'll have a better understanding of how to score projects that are vastly different. And cost. Like right now, I mean, depending on what the priority is, that scoring could change. I mean, we haven't really prioritized the priorities.
You're great, thank you. Yeah, we'll fix the typo, Eric.
I thought that was, for Speak Like a Pirate Day.
Now, we had asked about
You've asked the question about the pot.
if there's a ballpark timeline, can be included for, you know, when,
Like when this will take place.
Yeah.
During the calendar year. Yeah, fall.
and some kind of notification of the jurisdictions on when the funding is available and how much. is
Yeah,
available.
I think the way I would handle that is we'd send that IOU memo out to everybody and let you know, here's how much we have this year.
Okay,
Send us your projects.
that'd be good.
Welcome to the Thunderdome.
I think I just,
Lightsabers.
I think the only other comment was I requested some language about what NCDOT this closeout is. I need to, we'll see.
Okay, yeah.
just describing what it is exactly, because I don't even know if I know exactly what it is.
Get that language from David Wasserman.
And then changes to the language for the CFO certification.
We will change that
All right.
and make it more flexible.
The project scoring is referenced in an appendix that's not included
Huh.
in the materials.
Is the scoring being changed from the existing scoring?
No, not this time.
Just the one online is the one.
Yeah, that's okay. I'll include that for the board.
Got it. When I was looking at it.
Scoring will remain the same. We'll be taking, as you all know, a much deeper look into this when we do the project delivery study.
Will that result in changes to the scoring?
It could. And we're both in grant agreement. Good news. All right, well, I know we've had a lot of discussion today. The recommended action that we propose is to recommend that the TPO board approve this. We have time. I don't think it needs to be adopted in January. If you're more comfortable, I can work up an a new draft that includes the changes we've discussed today and bring that up in February.
Then we'll still, just like the MOU, we'll take and have a discussion with the board about.
Okay. Yeah, I'd like to propose that. Yeah.
Okay, very good. Thank you very much.
And then will you keep us updated on what you decide for the Culver project timeline? Okay,
Yes, we will.
thank you.
My pleasure. Up again.
Yeah, you're on the local input point methodology update.
All right. Well, it's that time of year. We are officially for P8 in the little period of time where we need to approve our local input point methodology. The SPOT office requires that we send them a draft of how we're going to assign local input points by April 1st. We brought a version of this to you last year as we were getting ready to select SPOT projects because the local input point methodology also includes how we select SPOT projects. However, what we're going to be the schedule we're working from today is in January, you and the board will be reviewing the local input point methodology. The board will review for public comment. Once the public comment period is over, we will bring forward the final version of the local input point methodology for adoption in March. And then if there's any additional changes, we can do that at our meeting in April. Okay. For allocating local input points, this is a refresher because it's been 2 years since we've done this with P7. Right now, we are in the middle of what do we call it? The data review phase of SPOT. Thank you. We are going to be receiving the results of the scoring for regional projects. Statewide, regional, and division projects in May. I think regional is being scored right now. Statewide's happening now. We get that information first, then it trickles down.
You get all the scores at the same time,
Okay.
but you'll get the results of what got selected for statewide at the same time.
Okay, thank you. In June, we will assign local input points to our regional projects. And we'll already have how they scored at that time. We will probably have an idea if we use Campo's red line method of which projects fall above or below that line that are worth assigning points to that could actually get done funding. We'll get to that later this year. And then in August, our board will approve the official assignment of local input points to regional projects. Then we move on to division needs. We can assign the local input points for division needs earlier as well, but typically I think this TPO has done it afterward in September. So we'll rank according to this methodology, which projects we think we want to put local input points on that are division level, and then the board will assign that and adopt it or approve that in November. This is the beginning of many more months of fun. Some changes since P7. My notes in front of me, but there have been some categories that were removed, not from us. This is NCDOT work group actions. Paved shoulder width and pavement condition on the statewide have been, those points have been added to, I think it's safety.
Lane width.
Lane width. Okay. But they didn't add, no, those were combined into lane width.
Right.
But the
Well,
points. were added
percentages,
to
right,
safety,
safety, yes, yes.
and I think freight and congestion. Same thing, pavement condition, paved shoulder width, those are going away. And instead points have, or percentage points have been added to safety and freight and congestion. And then similarly on the division side, I believe. Matt can correct me if I'm wrong. He's the work group expert. Okay, close enough. Bike ped criteria weights, they're not eligible for statewide or regional impact funding. But here's the division needs point assignment. Public transportation, not eligible for statewide. There are some of those types of projects are eligible for regional funding, and then all of them are eligible for division needs. But these are the percentages for those points will be assigned. And this is it for rail. This is, I'll include this so you guys can look at it later if you want to dig deeper. Yes.
Maybe this is early for this. Has there been any conversation with our fellow MPOs or divisions about alternative scoring?
Yes, and they did not agree to change. Okay. But we
Appreciate that. Thank you.
gave the good old college try. Campo was willing, but the other RPOs were not.
Okay.
I think DOT was amenable too, but without total consensus,
right,
we don't get to change. For our local input point allocation process, which is separate from what the previous slides for NCDOT, we coordinate closely with the NCDOT divisions. We coordinate closely with our neighbors on assigning local input points to projects. And we can flex points. We did this actually in P7 too. We moved points out of division and up into regional, I think, or maybe it was the other way around. We can flex points between the two levels based on the amount of funding that's available within that regional or division tier. And I think we have not seen how much funding is available the last few months, but I think we can expect there not to be very much funding in the division tiers. So. The only changes we are making to the criteria are about language. So we have added something a little more specific about the safety. So right now that we have an adopted Vision Zero action plan, we're going to give extra points to projects that are on the high injury network. Or that's what we're recommending. And we changed the language around the equity piece. So project supports underrepresented communities, areas of persistent poverty and opportunities. Okay, the good stuff. We have 2,000 points in regional impact to allocate. 800 for highway, 500 for public transit, 700 can go to any mode, according to this policy. And the division needs, we have 2,000 points. Well, 300 for highway, 500 for public transit, 500 for bike path, and 700 can go to any mode. And we can deviate from our methodology for pretty much everything. If we see the need. I don't think we usually deviate very much. We love it. We're going to be posting it in a variety of locations once it goes out for public comment and along with the schedule. And the last thing, I know this is long, I'm sorry guys. The other thing we changed was adding some additional language about how we're going to select projects that move forward to an express design. Express design only applies to the highway mode for spot. We already selected the first 3 projects that will go into express design. Those are, I think, I'm going to be underway very soon. And we have 2 more opportunities to select 3 highway projects for express designs. The process, as I had outlined in the fall or before the break, would be we'd look at our new MTP that we're about to adopt next month, which highway projects are on there that we want to add to compete in spot, and review those for their competitiveness in the spot process. If there are other P8, that's the current spot process, P8 highway projects that have not yet received an express design, they would be submitted in order of score. And then lastly, projects for submittal would be scored according to the local input point methodology. Any questions? Yeah.
It's
all right. I love it.
In the last year or so about intersection improvement project and DOT used to go through phases where they would invite class school, those types of projects. Will those, if there's interest in those, would those also go through an express design and technically they'd be considered a highway project?
That's a good question. I know there are some exceptions to the require, like if it's a certain type of project, it does not require an express design. And I would need to look at that again. I don't have it in front of me. Matt, do you know the answer?
So to a certain extent, it depends on what kind of improvement it is. If it's a more complicated kind of improvement, they're probably going to have to do some sort of design work anyway, because they'll have to give some kind of design to the congestion management folks in order to score it.
Maybe
case by case.
It depends.
Reject the DOT.
Yeah.
Any other questions or comments?
Will you add this presentation to the materials?
Yes.
Looking for a recommendation of board adoption.
So moved.
Moved by Aaron.
Board released for comment.
Oh, I wrote it wrong on my.
Board approved to release for comment.
Thanks.
It's wrong on the chamber.
Oh,
It's on the agenda, Ron.
says recommend the board approve, recommend the board adopt the local, but,
That was, we're just releasing for public comment.
okay.
That's recommended.
Do I need to move again?
Yeah.
So moved.
Moved by Aaron, seconded by Paul.
Thank you.
Favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That's unanimous.
Thank you.
Hello. So the continuation of our bringing back presentation that we gave in October about the environmental justice updated methodology, and some preliminary findings based on the MTP performance measures. quick little refresher for some of the legal background of all of this. We are required as part of the Title 6 of the 1964 Civil Rights Act to ensure that everybody has fair access to TPO stands and processes. The environmental justice identification helps us tailor the outreach and ensure universal accessibility. As well as we're also prohibited from discriminating on the grounds of race, color, sex, and national origin. So this helps ensure that we are complying with a lot of those Title VI requirements. Some of the prior federal guidelines around environmental justice have been revoked. That hasn't imposed new requirements on us. It just means that we're not bound by the old prior administration's EJ requirements, but we're still allowed to do all of those things if we so choose. The old methodology that was adopted in, I believe, 2020, took these 7 communities of concern. It used ACS data to find what % of the population were part of these communities in each block group. So that's zero-car households, low-income households, Black and / African-American households, Hispanic households, minority households, and senior adults. If a block group was above the 75th percentile, it was designated as an environmental justice community, and overlaps in these block groups were considered to be of the highest need. There's a couple of problems. The 75th percentile, thank you, Paul, not arbitrary, but it does have limited explanatory value when it comes to access. It amplifies a lot of the issues with ACS data quality. It's pretty good overall, but when you're looking at the kind of margins of errors of 2 or 3%, if that knocks a block group to say the 73rd percentile, when if we did a census, it would be at the 76th percentile, means we weren't flagging it under this old methodology. It also ignores kind of the overlap of multiple disadvantaged groups at kind of like medium to high level concentration, which is prevalent and especially in Orange County. And it doesn't allow for adjustments based on kind of like known neighborhood characteristics. We know where investment has been happening. We know where disinvestment has been happening. This kind of allows us to acknowledge that. So the new baseline kind of methodology that we presented to you back in October takes those same 7 demographic groups. It scores them on a category based on percentile. So a block group with a 85th percentile senior population was given a score of 8. The scores across those 7 categories were then summed to create what we're calling a transportation disadvantage index. This is all based on how NCDOT has set up their transportation disadvantage index, environmental justice work. A couple of different benefits for it. It increases flexibility, the data collection, ACS issues, and captures the differences in how these demographics show up across our region. We got some feedback from the board and from y'all with the last presentation, so we made a couple of adjustments. We tested out essentially 4 different versions of this index. The main thing was we included the % of the population that has a disability and the % of a population that is veterans. Those groups have some slightly different transportation needs just based off of their ability, as disability, that kind of stuff. So that's included in all these 4 different indexes that we created, but we also received some pretty compelling evidence that like income is the most important thing when it comes to transportation access. So we adjusted the income percentage in a couple of different ways to kind of see how that changed the distribution of the highest TDI block groups across the region. The one that we ended up looking at and saying this is the one that makes the most sense was this kind of 4th one. That took the federal areas of persistent poverty. That's something that FTA and USDOT have been very insistent is a metric that they are considering incredibly important. So those block groups had their % low income population score essentially doubled, which doesn't change a whole lot, but it does highlight a couple of areas that weren't really showing up before. And I've got a map that shows you. Ta-da! So the shaded areas, the kind of like crosshatches, are those federal areas of persistent poverty. This dark purple are our top 25% TDI block groups. You can see they're mostly concentrated in Durham, especially in East Durham. But we can see there are some areas that kind of show up along NC 54 in Harborough, kind of along the MLK corridor in Chapel Hill. UNC's campus shows up on there because UNC students are considered poor. That's not entirely reflective of reality, but I do think it does reflect limited incomes of the students themselves, even if their families have plenty of money. And then although around I-85 and outside of Hillsborough also kind of shows up as like a 50 to 75th percentile block group under this methodology. I will point out these are based on, I've transitioned these to the MTP's TAZs in this map so we could show the performance metrics. The actual methodology is based on the block groups though. So performance measures, we wanted to kind of validate this with the MTP, show how does this index actually match up to access across different modes. So these are some of the performance measures that the model kind of spits out for 2020 and 2055. Jobs that are accessible for each TAZ, normalized by the employment within those TAZs. So it's not just kind of showing population and employment centers. This is by automobile, which gets a little kind of wacky, the distribution. So this first one on your left is the 2020 results. This was the 2055, so the MTP draft version.
Can you highlight what changed?
Yeah, the maps look the same to me.
Yeah, the changes show up a little bit more with transit and walking, but for automobile,
Thank you.
So I don't, is this raw numbers or is this like?
so this is the number of jobs that each TAZ, that a person in each TAZ has access to by their car in 30 minutes, kind of normalized across the region by the employment within those TAZs.
So it's not the number of jobs in each TAZ, it's the number of
Jobs
people
that they
in
have access to. Yeah.
jobs that a person living in that TAZ has access to within 30 minutes.
And the reason kind of why we're showing that is there's a lot of economic evidence that suggests that economic mobility is pretty highly tied to job access.
But you said it's normalized by jobs in the TAZ. Because it's a little confusing to me why some of the rural, like there's rural places that are popping, but there's not many jobs.
It's accessible. If you lived in that place, that's how many jobs, it's showing how many jobs you could get to in 30 minutes. 30 minutes from the origin point.
So if 5 people lived there and there were 5 jobs, it would be
If
purple.
5 people lived there and they could access 5,000 jobs in 30 minutes, it would be purple, right? Or however many.
Yeah.
Take into account that certain jobs are now remote.
That's a good question.
Person.
I think that's a
Yeah.
yeah. I'm paying. I don't know if you have any insight into that. For how the
Remote.
model takes into account remote jobs.
Remote job, not really. More of job based on the pre-COVID travel survey, hospital travel survey. So that if factor share in the survey are relatively low compared with post-COVID situation. So in other words, that is consideration. The network in the model that is pre-COVID.
I think these maps make a little bit more sense when you look at like the walk sheds. And then we've also got access via transit, but we can go back.
there any way we could get this in our? We'll take a look and then.
Yeah, I can turn this into a web map.
What also might be helpful is a map that shows the TAZs with the greatest delta or the greatest change. Because, yeah, a lot of these maps look the same, but if there's a way to just highlight the, I'm guessing, handful of TAZs that show us significant difference between 2020 and 2020 and 2055, and then overlaying that on our, we're not using the term community of concern anymore, whatever.
Underrepresented community.
Thank you. That would be interesting to see if our underrepresented communities are actually the ones seeing the difference between the 35 years.
I could see some change.
There are some, but it's hard. Yeah, it's hard to see. I think if you just looked at the ones that had significant change between the two, then I think those handful would pop out a lot more and be easier to see.
I appreciate that you use the accessibility model. I think that's really useful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There is some other performance measures that I've kind of kept internal right now. They'll be in the EJ report, just using EPA's smart location database that suggests that on like the walkability front, there aren't very drastic differences in average level of walkability between the TPO region as a whole and kind of like top 25 percentile disadvantaged communities, but there is a much wider range within those high TDI ones. So it kind of depends, like if you are near our downtown core and you fall underneath these, you have a lot more access to transit and walking. And I think that makes sense. But outside of kind of like the inner urbanized areas, it really starts to fall hard. There are any questions. I think the recommendation is that the action is to recommend the board adopt the updated methodology.
Just so I understand, the federal changes recently said you no longer had to do this, but you still can voluntarily.
Well, the federal changes meant we no longer had to measure EJ. We're still required to analyze Title VI.
And this covers both, right? Okay.
But without specifically talking about the things that EJ included, the Title VI doesn't specifically.
Any other questions, comments? Looking for a motion for recommendation of board approval.
I'll make that motion.
Moved by Caroline,
Second.
second by Ellen, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes unanimously. With that, we're done with our action items. On to recent news, articles, updates. Next meeting is February 10th. Looking for a motion to adjourn.
So moved, Paul Black, go track.
Second.
Second by Aaron, all in favor?
It's almost.